First of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here. It's a nice opportunity to meet what's happening in the UK on this respect. My name is Henk Hindriks. I'm working at the Hanze University in Groningen, in the Netherlands, University of Applied Science. And I'll show you in the presentations how we try to bridge the gap between the individuals, like you excellently showed. It's about people who are really interested in their own information. But I guess we, as the more research-oriented people, are also able to join this and to gain from this, if the individual allows us, because it's them in control. A couple of the slides you will see, and probably you heard a lot of it already. We cover more or less the same story, so I can probably go a bit faster on this one. Quantified Self is about personal meaning to personal data. That's what the guys on the right, Gary Wolf and Kevin Kelly, invented. They started in 2007 as a community, and the first TED Talk by 2010 was the moment when they really gained attention. 2011, the first international conference in California, and we'll have a look at the meetups later, but at the moment there's 165 groups in 38 countries meeting and telling what you told about. It's what did we learn? More than 30,000 people active in this community, because it's a community. It's not any organization, it's just individuals joining this, sharing it because they think it's interesting. There's worldwide conferences. There was one in Amsterdam last year in September, I guess it was, September, October, don't know exactly. The next one will be in San Francisco, March 2015. And after that, we get another European conference again in September 2015 in Amsterdam. Talking about these conferences, Gary Wolf, who more or less carefully curated non-conferences. That's the way he makes it. Which means it is a conference, but it's people telling to others what they did. How did they do it and what did they learn? So it's not a conference in the way people telling about others, for example. Or like I'm doing now in my presentation, because I'm telling about Quantified Self. But I'll try to bring in as much as possible the personal experience, which is the real basic of this movement. This is the community, Quantified Self meetups. It's dated 11. I saw today it was even growing again, so it's actually being updated every day. And if you look at Europe, you see a lot of different places where it's been. Amsterdam was one of the first, London was the second, and you see a long list from St. Petersburg, Warsaw, Czech Republic, etc. And also if you look at the map, you see it popping up in all parts of the world. Although Africa is still a bit behind. South Africa, it's not on the map, but it's there. But it's the only one at the moment which really has this kind of groups. So it's a little bit maybe something we have in our rich world similarity. It's something which we are able to spend time on. And that's something it's also good to remember and maybe also share with the people who could use it. 3 basic questions, we heard it already. What did you do? How did you do it? What did you learn? That's the 3 things everybody in every meetup tells about, so others can learn from them. Looking at self-tracking health data, we did a survey 2 years ago where we said 50% of the Dutch adults. In 2013, there was a 70% US adults all measuring themselves in any way. But nowadays, of course, with the new lots of devices and apps coming on the market, you see that 25% of these 70% measure themselves at least one form of technology, other than the regular weight scale or the waistband or whatever. If you look at the devices around us, if you look at the market, the consumer devices, this is the electronics show, January 2014, there was a massive amount of new devices on the market. Consumer devices all measuring healthcare related information. Either steps, either blood pressure, either heart rhythms or whatever. Even so that in 2014 was called the year of wearable technology. There's a lot of things going on. Ruth mentioned it already. The big companies are joining us. They're all seeing this is something getting new perspectives, new opportunities. We don't know where it will end, but we have to join the band, we have to join the wagon because we have to be there. If you look at self-tracking, that's another nice research. The Quantified Self labs in the San Francisco, they work together with the Cal IT too in California, where they did a survey under a lot of people, where they tried to find what are the kind of things people really measure. And if you look at it, you see most of them are fitness related. Fitness, sports, diet and food. Well, especially in America, of course, this is one of the hot topics, everybody being overweighted. But you see a lot of other items. Sleep, for example, we just heard about. Meditation, mood, relaxation, blood pressure, fertility, blood sugar. Of course, people who have diabetes, they are more motivated than others to keep track of that. But you see a lot more and more devices are coming on the market which make this possible for a low price, for 50 to 100 pounds, even less maybe. So it's something which is really getting close to every individual. And at the moment, it's a technology push. And that's something we have to keep in mind if we look at what's going to be happening with all these new developments. Funny thing is, if you look at what people do with the data, most, of course, take it for themselves. They like the graphs, they like to see, they like to learn from themselves, and they can improve themselves with all this information because they get grip on what's happening with me. If you look at sharing your data, you see that 60% also shares the data with friends. Might be either Facebook or Twitter or other social media, but there's a lot of groups. You probably know the Run Keeper groups, people who are jogging and making their tracks every day. They have a nice Facebook environment where you can say, I did 8 kilometers today, how much did you do? This kind of competitions you see arising. If you look at here, there's the third one, the health professional. So people really get with their data, go to their general practitioner and say, hey, I see my sleeping pattern is changing. I don't like this. I'd like some help from you to get grip on my sleeping pattern. So this is a new form of medicine where you are. Lately I was at a conference where they said this is patient 3.0 because we had patient 2.0 Googling on the internet and say, ooh, I might have this, ooh, I might have that. And the practitioner just has to convince them it's not this because you don't have these symptoms. It's not that you don't have these symptoms. This is the patient which comes in with a lot of data about himself for many years maybe. And with this data, the practitioner can see what's been before, what's going on. Maybe I can help this guy. Funny thing is, if you look at the sharing your data, it's only sharing with people you know. Even a social group, members, parents, children, etc. Almost never with unknown people, people you don't know. And that's something I would like to show you. There are really new possibilities here. I don't know if you know this website, Patients Like Me, but whatever rare disease you have, you can find other people worldwide which have the same disease, which did the same treatment, and which can tell you what works and what doesn't work. In this case, a kidney transplant. People with this kind of problems are mostly left on their own. There's a regular medical treatment based on a large group and say, this should work for you. In this case, these individuals also grip their own environment. They can tell others, I took this kind of, well, let's say this amount of sugar, and I see it works that way. Or whatever they did, but they can share it with others and find each other. Another more technology-driven, I like it. I'm from technology background, so this is something I like a lot. This is Propeller Health. If you have COPD, hay fever, and you are in a certain time of the year, you better avoid certain places. But which places to avoid? I know even some kind of weatherman, they even say this is an area which you should avoid when you have hay fever, type A, type B, whatever. Here's a very small device, very small technology, which is just on the moment you press your inhaler, it marks with your smartphone the place where you are, the spot, exactly the GPS coordinates, the time and the date. And if you share this on a map, and you can see it on the left here, you get places where many people with these devices need a puff, which means if you're allergic to this or you better avoid these places, you know where not to go. So this is a good example, sharing your data with people you don't know, but together as a community you gain from it, because you gain from the bad experiences, in this case, from other people. In Quantified Self, we try to categorize these. And if you look at the people here, the Quantified Self, it's always N is 1. It's about yourself. and it's useful for yourself. It's your data. You can learn from it, you can change, you can really get a grip on your behavior, you can get a grip on what's happening when I drink coffee, or how well can I really maintain my stable state in meditation, etc. That's very interesting for the individual. If you look at group data, we see the quantified us, which is where you, as an individual, share your data with others, which might gain or even see some examples. For more or less, meetups are the place where we say this is quantified us, but also technology is coming in there. This is the traditional healthcare, quantifying others. I want to know what's happening in the other person. You see it with dementia people. You see it with a lot of patients' environment where the medicine tries to put on devices and get a grip on what's happening in the patient. It's aimed at the patient, but the information is not for the patient, because the doctor is the one who's interpreting the data and then telling the patient what to do. And the last one, it's a very nice one, which is also coming up. We have a nice project in our region, which is called Lifelines, where 165,000 people are being followed in their medical records for 30 years. Which means you really build a large database with a lot of blood and a lot of urine and a lot of medical data, which is being stored for 30 years. It's the first time when somebody comes to the doctor, which you can see what was his state 10 or 15 years ago. I never realized, but if you look at the moment, our current healthcare, you only go to the doctor when you're off balance, when you're not in your right mood anymore, when you're something wrong with your body. And then they take a lot of blood samples and other things, and they say, ooh, I see in the general condition there's a small difference in certain, well, whatever. Take a pill and it will get better. Now suddenly you get the opportunity to really look back into people's history, and people can get their own information. So this is going to be a really new, interesting field of study where you can store data and get individual data joined with medical data. So we go from curative towards preventive medicine. What you told us already, one of the things, I know the physiotherapists like it a lot, 40% of people joining a physiotherapist have low back aches, which means they have a bad attitude, that they're not sitting in the right posture. They should change their posture. Always when I talk about this, you see people, yeah, good. It's really good, everybody knows, everybody thinks, but everybody forgets about it. So there's a new device which you put on your waist, and it gives you a small vibrating motor telling you you're slouching. You should be sitting up straight again. Very easy, very handy, and yeah, the physiotherapists really like it because it's a very good way to get your grip on your exercises. From healthcare towards self-care, or like Ruth said already, from being sick to staying healthy. That's what we're going to. You're not one in the big crowd, and this is the general purpose medicine which works for everybody. You're the individual. You know more about yourself, you have more data about yourself, and you can get more grip on what's good for you instead of what's good for the group, because nobody is exactly the same as the rest. From randomized controlled trials towards personalized medicine, that's where we're going. And that's what we saw, things like the personal genome service. You really can get a grip on your own information. This is available for about $100. You can get your own DNA, and you get a lot of information about what kind of risks you run. Not all, because they're not allowed to show them all, but many general risks which they can derive from the DNA, you can already get on this way. And it's something which every individual can get, also below $100 nowadays. Opportunities here, it's something we call P4 medicine. It's preventive and predictive, because you know what's happening, you know your own patterns, and you see patterns changing. It's personalized, it's individual, and it's participatory. It's not you going to the doctor and the doctor tells you what to do. No, it's something, a joint effort. You do it together. You have the data, the doctor has some knowledge you don't have, and together you can work on a better health situation. Talking about the Quantified Self Institute, we try to bridge this gap. Like we said already, Quantified Self is individuals. People who would like to be empowered to get more grip on their own health, their own fitness, their own activity, their own life. We try to add the science part, not to put it in there, but to learn from this group, to see how we can gain as a society from what these individuals are doing. We were started in 2012 after visiting one of the world conferences in San Francisco, and we are a university of applied science, which means for us it's a really nice topic to get multidisciplinary groups together. It's not just about healthcare, it's not just about food and nutrition, it's not just about psychology, it's also technology, it's also about legal. There's a lot of other aspects all involved in the same topic. So that's why we said it's something which is worth their own institute. We're not much more than a project area. We don't do classes. We do classes, but on invitation of the other topics. We have, of course, a lot of different, how do you call it, sociology, psychology, this kind of working groups. How do you call them? Faculties, probably. We have a lot of faculties, but we do the topic of quantified self. And what we see, students are really much aware this is something coming at us. They are all using apps all the day. They are all using Fitbit. They are all using this kind of activity trackers. And they like the topic that maybe they can get a grip on their own healthcare this way. So for students, it's a very interesting area. We started off in telling about what we would like to investigate, the big five for a healthy life. Activity, food, stress, sleep, and social interaction. The first is the most easy one to measure. Activity trackers are quite common nowadays and quite easy. Food is a very complicated one because if you really want to do it well, you need to measure everything, how much did you eat and how many calories are in there, etc. But there's also things going on which might make it technology more easier. Stress, of course, we have the things like the meditation. We even have headsets where you can really measure the brain waves. Sleep is something which is mostly derived from activity. Most activity trackers also tell you about sleep. Ruth just showed that in her graph. And social interaction is something we feel is more and more important. On the one hand, it's the back of the other four. Walking alone, you walk differently than when you walk with somebody together. Eating alone, you eat differently than when you eat with someone together. So all these items are being influenced already by social interaction. But what you already mentioned, wearable technology is getting into clothes nowadays. It's getting into fashion, which means it's going to be a next step, where there's a lot of technology probably in clothes showing your mood, or showing what you would like to do, or who you would like to meet. There's a lot of new developments coming up which might even make social interaction more important than the other physical aspects. We started off with getting, and in 2012 it was still doable, which devices are available. Like I showed you, it's a massive amount coming on the market. It's hardly doable anymore. Especially if you look at the Chinese market coming up at the moment, South Korea, Southeast Asia, there's a lot of devices. Some of them are fair, some of them are good, but it's almost undoable. So what we are looking at is what devices are usable for individuals. What if you like to have, for example, know more about your sleep? Which device would you take? What we also see, there's a lot of groups working on it. For example, employers who would like to have their employee more fit. They have this kind of programs for that. And they come to us and say, hey, can you help us with the selecting which device can we use here? And that's something which we've been doing quite a while. So we're more and more not only looking at the reliability and validity, but especially on the effectiveness of devices. I lately had a nice topic where you see that in America they say 60% of all activity trackers are somewhere in a drawer. People like the gadget, wear it for a while, but after 3 months you know your pattern. The thrill is gone. You put it away and you don't use it anymore. It's something which you really should have with a more or less psychological support to integrate it if you want to integrate it. If you really learn something where you want to change it. It's like people standing on the weight scale. They say, oh, I should do something about my weight. 3 weeks later, they step up the scale again and say, oh, I should do something about my weight. So you need more than just the devices. It's not just the technology. It's a lot more about, well, what you see at meetups, telling people about it, gaining opportunities to learn from others. One particular project we talked about on the Quantified Self conference, we have a big project, oh, at least for us it's a big project. It's a 1 million euros project, so it's a fair project. It's a 3-year project where we try to get grip on obesity awareness and kids from between 5 to 16 years of age. What we see is that most of the consumer trackers at the moment are aimed at adults running in a steady pace. That's what you can measure quite easily. Kids have quite a different way of moving. They are a lot more impulse-driven. There's a lot more different in their motorical way of moving, which means you don't measure it with a regular consumer device. On the other hand, we would also like to open up the device, not what you have at the moment. This device, I have a Fitbit here, stores my data at a database from Fitbit. The data you show with Jawbones, very interesting data, but owned by the owner of the device. Lately somebody told me, if I make a picture with a Kodak camera, it's my picture, it's not for Kodak. Here, you make graphs with your data, and it's from the company who gave you the device. That shouldn't be the way. There's something wrong here, and we don't realize it yet. People don't realize it yet. At the moment, they like the graphs, and they say, oh, I can join in. But there's going to be a big problem when all this data is going to be gathered, because you get really a lot of individual data. I mean, if my Fitbit data, there's also my sleep, which means if somebody can track me, they can see how my sleep pattern changes. When we put in stress, I know my boss would like to know when I'm in stress or when not. It's something very interesting information, but I don't like him to know. So this data should be my data and really well protected, one of the topics in our project. We have a lot of companies, local companies on hardware and software development. We have an e-health web platform for physiotherapists, a university medical research institute, and we have a healthcare organization who mostly take care of this kind of children groups. I don't know whether you have it in England, but this GGD, a general health practitioner, looks at babies for the first time, and until the age of a kid, until 12-year-old, they see the kid 8 years. But then they're on their own, because then they're not interesting anymore, apparently, and after that they go to the general practitioner. So there's a gap, and this is the age where obesity, but also drug abuse, alcohol abuse, things like that arise. And there's nobody for these kids where they can go with their problems, with their questions. Mostly the parents are a bit too, it's the age where you try to get off from your parents, to get away from your parents. So it's not the place where you go when you have a problem on that part. But also not your friends, because your friends are the ones who talk you into, we should do this because that's our social environment. So this general GTD tries to fill in the more or less big brother. We know you from babyhood already, we have all your medical data, and maybe we can support you if you have any medical problems or questions. So for them, it's a completely new field. And they feel activity trackers can give insight to this group. Yeah. So what we are aiming at is an open source activity tracker. The data of the sensor should be available to everybody. So you can measure whether people are walking, swimming, running, playing hockey, riding a horse, whatever. It means different algorithms, quite complicated. But opening it up to everybody, it might mean there's a lot of groups who could really use it for specific purposes. The other part is the open source data vault, where the data will be in a reliable, secure, privacy guaranteed, individual controlled data source. We work together with this Lifelines project I just talked to you about. They have a double anonymized data structure where researchers can find the data but never know where it came from. So it's a very good, and I know when I join the project, I donate my data, and when I don't want to do, they withdraw my data. I'm certain of it. This kind of things should be, rules and regulations should be in place. So there should be an open interface, an API for other extensions, people who would like to have the tracker involved or combined with other apps. And the field trials are starting at the moment, or have just started this semester, the first small participation where we try if this kind of activity trackers with kids of these age groups really work. Do they wear them? Do they like them? Do they keep them, etc.? About 5 more minutes. Is it still in time? Good. What we talk about is the personal health data research. Again, from the Kelly 2. Individual data is at this moment mostly through devices given to companies. Or the individual works with researchers where the researchers have them. And mostly the researchers do some public good, so it returns to the individual. But the lines underneath are hardly there. Companies are at this moment gathering data. I always compare it to Google. When Google started, it was a very nice company with a very lean and clean search engine. At this moment, Google is the one who knows what is the most searched topic in Japan at this moment, or in Brazil, or wherever. It's very valuable data which is being gathered. We don't know it yet. Most people don't see it yet, but there's a lot of things going on. So the challenges are the quality of the data, the validity and the reliability, especially in the medical and in the research environment. People always want to be sure it's exactly the number of steps, or it's exactly the number of calories. As an individual, in the Quantified Self, it measures my trend, which means I can see I did more steps today than yesterday. And whether it's 5,000 to 6,000 doesn't matter. I see a progression, or I see another trend. But at least that's what I'm looking at. So for them, the validity and reliability is a lot less important, unless you bring it together with other devices. And then suddenly, of course, you want to see the same data. What you told us about your phone, that it gave you a different number of steps than your step counter. That's quite common, because they have a different algorithm behind it. Data sharing and access, the usability and interoperability of sharing. I don't know, we talked about it in Amsterdam, but there's a lot of devices on the market, and they all have different units. They all have different timestamps. They all have different ways of storing the data. And if you want to integrate them into one dashboard, well, you have a lot of work on that already, long time. Privacy and safety, a very important one. And the next step will be the legality, the legal part, and the data ownership. Who owns this data? Who is the one that really knows where the data is going? This is the Gartner hype cycle. The nice thing is Quantified Self is still somewhere in the start here, and if you believe this is the one from July 2014, we still have 5 to 10 years before it reaches the flatness, which means the coming 5 to 10 years there will be a lot of developments. We still have to go over the top, so there will be a lot of attention. And like you see, there's a lot of companies working on it. Short-term exploitation, Google Glass is there, the smartwatch is there, the biosensor Ruud talked us about already. Even printed circuits which you can print on the skin are there already. Google is working on a lens where you can measure the blood glucose through the lens, through the fluid of the eye, which is a 24-hour measurement, which is better than any drops of blood, because you have a 24-hour scale constantly. Apple Watch, coming up somewhere spring next year. The Microsoft Band just came out two weeks ago. All shown of big companies joining this new movement, the new technology, and giving opportunities to people. But on the other hand, there is also a lot of things to think about the data. All through the ages, humans always have been using technology. Technology to your own good, technology to your group good. So technology nowadays, which is coming on the market, it's good. We should use it. We should know it. We should feel what's happening and try to make it integrated and use it. Good. But in the end, it all comes down to the philosopher's stone, know thyself. That's my presentation.